I'm Hannah, this is Piles of Books, and today I'm going to be sharing my April reading wrap-up. Okay, so these are the nonfiction books that I finished this month. I started How to Win Friends and Influence People and didn't get it finished in time for this video. And I also had a DNF, and that was Studies in the Sermon on the Mount by Oswald Chambers. So I'm just putting that book to the side for now. I think I probably will pick it back up later this year. But it just, I don't know. It didn't really feel like the right time for me to be reading it. I picked it up to read after I finished Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland. And I can't necessarily say that one is right and one is wrong, but they didn't, I don't know how to really put it. They just, I don't know if opposing views is really the right way to say it, but they just painted Jesus in different lights, I felt like. And this book really spoke to me, and I was just kind of basking in all that I learned from this book. And that book just kind of felt heavy, and I don't know. From what I remember about it, reading it like 12 years ago or so, it is a good book. And like I said, I probably will pick it up later on. But I really loved this book a lot. And the way that God was portrayed in here. And I did just want to meditate on the teachings in this book and the scriptures in this book for a while before picking that one up again. So this book was lovely. It was, I haven't heard anything bad about it. So many people have said that they loved it, and I am definitely one of those. I did highlight quite a few things, but there were just some things like this quote, "The intercession of Christ is his heart connecting our heart to the Father's heart." And that really just made me stop and think about that and how wonderful that is. And there were just so many things that, I would read, and it was like, that is so simple, yet so profound. And I learned a lot. He quoted some different men, some different theologians in here that I've never heard of. I've never read their works. I was very interested in learning more about some of these men. So this book was 5 stars. I thought it was great, and I'm sure that I will be referring back to this in the future. The next one I have is Know and Tell, The Art of Narration by Karen Glass. So if you're new here, I am a Charlotte Mason homeschooling mom, and narration plays a big part in our education philosophy. So basically what that means, if you're not familiar with it, we read a lesson, a chapter from a book, or, part of a chapter or whatever it is for that day's lesson, and then my kids narrate back to me what they remember from the lesson. That is basically just how they're learning. I'm not asking them questions. There aren't any multiple choice questions or anything like that. They're having to remember it so they can tell it back. And I felt like I had a good grasp on narration, but this book really just explained kind of the nitty-gritty details of it and how useful it is, and how it's being used beyond just school. I had tons of highlights in here. There were so many things that I marked to come back to. I have recommended this book to several homeschooling mom friends already. This is one that I wish I had read sooner in our homeschooling career, but I'm glad that I read it now, and it's definitely one that I'm going to be referencing probably for the next, I have a 2-year-old, so the next 14 or 16 years probably. It's a good one. The next one is Loving God with All Your Mind by Elizabeth George. So this was from my 24 nonfiction from my shelves to read this year list, and it was great. This was definitely a good one for me to be reading right now. I just felt like there were several things that, I thought, okay, yeah, God really, he wanted me to read that at this point, I think. I didn't really mark anything in here, I don't think. It was good. It wasn't probably as deep as some of the things that I've been reading lately. So it was an easy read, but it also, I mean, it did make me, stop and think. I did write down some Bible verses, marked a few things in my Bible. And this is another one that I have recommended already. I'm very glad that I read it. It was great. It, like I said, it wasn't, it wasn't really deep, but it was just a nice, easy read that was edifying in many ways. So yes, this is a good one. And the last nonfiction that I did was Fast Like a Girl by Dr. Mindy Peltz. So this book is big. When it came, I remember, like, I was surprised at how big it was. I wasn't expecting this big of a book. However, it's only like half reading. So the other half of it is recipes of all different kinds. So this is about where the recipes start. So a third and 2/3 probably more like it, but this was great. This, I have done fasting off and on for like the last 6 years, and I've never really felt like I've seen all the benefits that people say that they get from fasting. It did make sense with some health issues that I've been dealing with in the last year, why I'm not seeing those benefits, and she just really explains it in very easy to understand terms. If you're a woman and you're interested in fasting at all, I would definitely highly recommend reading this book. It was great. She also has a YouTube channel where she shares basically all the information in here, just on her YouTube channel, but I found that reading the book was just an easier way to get all the information. This was great. I am so glad that I read this. It was so popular there for a while that I kind of felt like it was maybe just, I don't know, I wasn't really that excited about reading it, but I am very glad that I picked it up. I learned a ton in here, and I've studied fasting and nutrition for several years now, but there was still so much that I learned from here. It was great. Okay, so let's talk about my fiction books as well. So, these are not in any particular order. So the first one I read is Bells on Their Toes. This is by Frank Gilbreth Jr. and Ernestine Gilbreth Carey. It is the sequel to Cheaper by the Dozen by the same authors. This is such a fun book. It was not as hilarious as the first one, but it was just as charming, just as delightful. It was great. So sometimes when I read like a first book, or I have a new to me author and I love the book, I am oftentimes afraid to pick up something else because what if I don't love it as much? That was the case with this. I've been putting off reading this book for a while because I loved Cheaper by the Dozen, and I just felt like nothing really could live up to that. I was scared of the sequel. This was great in many, many ways. So the children are older. We're seeing them going off to college and getting married and having kids of their own. It was such a fun read. This was a great start to my month. I'm so glad that I read it. And this duology, I don't know if they would technically be considered a duology, but these two books, Cheaper by the Dozen and Bells on Their Toes, definitely go down as some favorite books of mine. The next one that I'm going to talk about is a huge surprise to me. I have heard Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day talk about this book for, I don't know, maybe a year, and I've had it on my shelf for probably almost just as long. And even though she says it's great, I have just, like, I look at it and it just doesn't feel like it's something that I would enjoy, but I did. The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This book was fantastic. It's a small book. It did not take me very long to read. I cried at the end of it. This is the story of a gang, and 3 of the gang members are brothers. There's Daryl, he's the oldest, and then Soda Pop and Pony Boy. And they had recently, like I think within the last year or two maybe, they had lost their parents. And so they were just living on their own. Daryl was old enough to work a job and take care of his younger brothers. But they aren't a gang. They get into some trouble. There are some definitely sad parts of the story, but this was eye-opening to me. I'm not, like, gangs, I live in the Midwest, in the rural Midwest. Gangs are, like, not a part of my everyday life or even every decade life. Like, that's never been part of my culture. So reading about that was sad, but it was also, like I said, it was very eye-opening. This was wonderful. I cannot wait to read more of her books. I do have one or two, I think, on my shelf already that I got at a garage sale a couple years ago. This is definitely going to be one of those books that I recommend to friends or high school kids that I know, and one that will go on a mandatory reading list for my kids when they are older. So the next one that I read is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I read this for Alcott April. This, I read it in high school, and I even did a book report on it, but I could not tell you how it ended. I could not remember how it ended. So I was really glad to reread this, and I think I gave it a 3. I think I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, but I really think that it was probably more like 4. 3 feels a little low to me, but 4 almost seems a little high, so maybe like 3.5. I liked it. It was very good. There were times where I felt like, okay, this book is great. I can't really put my finger on what exactly it was that I didn't love about it. I was happy with the ending, but the ending wasn't necessarily happy, if that makes sense. So if you don't know about this classic story, it is about a woman named Hester, and I don't want to give away too much. I don't know how much is just like common knowledge about this book, but she has a baby out of wedlock. They are like Puritans in the 1600s. Of course, that was a terrible sin. And so she's just kind of an outcast. She's raising her daughter by herself. And then there are 2 men in the story. And you kind of know, like right at the beginning, who these men are and how they are connected to her. But it doesn't really come out, just outright and say until towards the end who these men are. So you see Hester kind of just going through life, going through the motions, raising her daughter. They just have a stigma about them. Like I said, they're kind of outcasts, but she does do work in the community because she is very skilled at sewing and embroidery and that sort of thing. So she does work for people, and she's able to take care of herself and Pearl, her little daughter. But then you do find out who the father of the child is and how all of that ends up. So this was dismal. I think dismal is a good word for this book. It was good. I'm very glad that I read it. I can see why it's a classic and, why it's on all of the homeschool book lists. But it was just kind of sad, and not in the way that like The Outsiders was sad, but just, yes, dismal. Like I said, I think that's a really good word for this book. Okay, so next I didn't read this whole book. I just read one play in here, and it was fairly short. These are plays by a Frenchman named Moliere in, I want to say, in the 1600s. I read this for the Literary Life podcast. They covered the play Tartuffe on the podcast, and so I read it along with them. Guys, this play was hilarious. It was downright funny. So the story really is about Tartuffe. He's not a priest, but he is a very holy man, you get the idea, and he lives with a family. He's like, I guess, kind of their spiritual advisor or something like that. I don't know if that was a thing back then. Like, I was kind of confused why he was living with them. But anyway, he's not as upright and holy as he wants you to think he is. And so the play is just kind of the blunders that happen and how all of that ends up. It was really funny. There were so many like quotable insults, I guess. I don't know. I can't hardly believe that I liked it as much as I did just because the storyline of it, but I suppose just the dry humor was, I don't know, it was funny. I chuckled out loud several times. So I was glad that I read this, and I probably will read some more of his plays because it was funny. The next one is The Story Girl by Ella Montgomery. I actually listened to this on audio except for like one chapter in the middle I read for some reason. I like this a lot. this rivaled Anne, I would say, for me. And I didn't realize, so my husband grew up watching, I don't know if it's called Road to Avonlea, and maybe there's 2 movies. I watched them once with him shortly after we were married. I think maybe with his younger siblings or something. But that movie is based off this book. So I didn't realize that until probably halfway through. There was a scene in the book and I was like picturing it in my mind, and so then I asked him, did this happen in this movie? And he's like, yeah. So that was just kind of fun. So I think I might see if I can get those on DVD from the library and watch them with my kids, because that was just kind of a fun little connection there. So this is the story of, well, it's not really the story of the story girl, I guess. I mean, it kind of is, but anyway, the story girl, her name is Sarah, but there's also another Sarah in this group of kids, so that's how they differentiate them. And the story girl tells stories. She's a master storyteller. She captivates the other children. She captivates the parents and adults, and with the stories that she tells. They are funny. You know, she's got ghost stories. She has history stories. She has fairy tales. Just, you know, some of the things she comes up with on her own. Some of the things she gathers from other people, like traveling, like missionaries that are traveling through, and just some of the adults. So I loved just the idea, I guess, of storytelling. Like, there were so many things in here that I thought, this is more than just a novel. This has some life lessons in it too, and just the importance of, you know, of telling stories and keeping those going through the generations. The next fiction book, or I guess this is the last one that I have, is The Inheritance by Louisa May Alcott. So I also read this for Alcott April. I read this book in 2 days. It was just a very easy read. It's a pretty short book, and it was also very captivating. So I didn't want to put it down. But I had not even heard of this book until the videos were coming out about Alcott April. I don't know how I've missed this. This was lovely. I really enjoy Little Women. Oh, I'm gonna have to move a little bit. The sun's shining in the window. Okay. I really enjoy Little Women. I have really enjoyed Little Men, and I think I've read Jo's Boys like as a child, but I don't really remember it. But I think that's it that I've read of hers. So I was glad to have read another one. So I'm just going to read to you off of the front flap here of the book, because I'm afraid I'm going to give something away, but this is a really good synopsis of the story. Set in an English country manor, the story follows the turbulent fortunes of Edith Avalon, an impoverished Italian orphan whose loyalty and beauty win her the patronage of wealthy friends until a jealous rival contrives to rob her of her position. In a locket around her neck, she carries a deep secret about her natural birthright, but an even greater truth lies hidden in Edith's heart. Her deep reverence for the kind and noble Lord Percy, the only friend who can save her from the deceitful Lady Ida. I was very happy for the way that it turned out. It was a bit predictable. I mean, I think you kind of just assume that it's going to end up the way that it ends up, but the journey of how we get from point A to point B was that was the fun part for me. I liked it a lot. This is one that I will absolutely read again. It was a page turner. I couldn't put it down. But it also was like, it didn't feel hectic. It was a relaxing read, but I definitely wanted to know what came next. So there was one more book that we read, but I forgot to bring it in here, and that was the signature biography of Louisa May Alcott. I will find the actual title of that. I can't remember, like, if signature, the publisher is Grosset and Dunlap, and there's a whole series of biographies, and they are for children, like middle grade age. We love them. I've read a number of them, and then my son has read several of them as well. We have quite a few of them. They're great. So for Alcott April, I needed to read a biography of her, I think was what it was, and I chose to read that because I wanted to read it out loud with my kids, and it was fascinating. It was so enjoyable to read. My kids were laughing at some of the things that happened in their home. Obviously, it was a bit of a turbulent home. I don't think that it was just, hunky-dory all the time. But they definitely loved each other, and the way that they stuck together and just their family story was inspiring. So I didn't even know that some really famous writers were friends of her father's, but just, to read, oh, she went out on a boat with Mr. Thoreau, or she started a kindergarten with Mr. Emerson's children, or, she went and played at Mr. Hawthorne's house. Okay, just go outside and make sure they get put away. It was fun to be able to tell my kids as I was reading The Scarlet Letter, this is written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was neighbors of the Alcotts, or you see those books up there that say Walden, those were written by Mr. Thoreau. Anyway, it was fun. It was a really good book. It was a great, I felt like, introduction to Louisa May Alcott's life. My kids loved it. They did not want me to stop reading. They asked for more every day, and that always makes a book sweeter. Alright, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here. I would love to know what you think of these books in the comments below, and we will see you in the next video.